Chapter 11. The day we arrived at this village was very rainy, and we were all drenched to the skin. We were assigned to very comfortable quarters with a large, comfortable furnished room that we could use as a dining and sitting room. This room was exceedingly warm and cheery, and one of our party asked where the heat came from. We all looked around but could not find the stove or any place where the heat came from, although there was a warm glow that was very noticeable. We wondered at this but did not say much, as we were becoming accustomed to surprises and were quite certain that all would be made plain later on. We had just seated ourselves at the dinner table when Emile and the four came in. We did not know where they came from. They were all appeared at one end of the room simultaneously, and at the end of the room where there were no openings. They appeared there without any noise or display, and walked quietly to the table where Emile introduced the others. Then they sat down as though perfectly at home. Before we realized it, the table was filled with good things to eat, but no meat. These people do not eat meat nor anything that has had conscious life. After the meal was finished and we were sitting around the table, one of our party asked how the room was warmed. Emile said, "The warmth that you feel in this room comes from a force that we are all able to contact and use. This force or power is higher than any of your mechanical force or power, but can be contacted by man and used as light, heat, and power, even to the driving of all mechanical appliances. It is what we call a universal force. If you were to contact and use this force, you would call it perpetual motion. We call it universal power, God power, supplied by the Father to work for all His children. It will turn and move every mechanical device, furnish transportation without the consumption of fuel in any way, and will also furnish light and heat. It is everywhere present without money or price, and can be contacted and used by all." One of our party asked if the food had been prepared by this force. We were told that the food came prepared as we had eaten it, direct from the universal, just the same as the bread and the other provisions has been supplied heretofore. We were then invited by Emile to accompany the group to their home, about 200 miles distant, where we would meet Emile's mother, who went on to say, "My mother is one who has so perfected her body that she was able to take it with her and go on and receive the highest teachings. Therefore, she is living in the invisible at all times. She is doing this from choice, as she wishes to receive the highest, and by receiving the highest teaching, she is able to greatly assist us. In order to make this clear to you, I might say that she has gone on until she has reached the celestial realm, as you would call it, the place where Jesus is. This place is sometimes called the seventh heaven. To you, I suppose this suggests the mystery of mysteries. Let me say that there is no mystery about it. It is a place in consciousness where every mystery is revealed. Those who have reached that state of consciousness are outside the mortal vision, but they can return and converse and teach those who are receptive. They can come in their own bodies, for they have so perfected their bodies that they can go where they will with them. They are able to return to earth without reincarnation. Those who have passed through death are obliged to be reincarnated in order to return to earth with a body. This body was given to us as a spiritual perfect body, and we must so see and keep the body in order to retain it. Those who have left the body and have gone on in spirit now realize that they must again take up a body and go on and perfect it. It was arranged before leaving the table that evening that the party should divide into 5 groups, each group in charge of one of the 5 that had appeared in the room and taken dinner with us. This would enable us to cover a larger field and would greatly facilitate our work. And at the same time, it would enable us to verify such things as traveling in the invisible and thought transference. This plan would give us at least 2 of our men in each party and one of the 5 as leader. We would be quite widely separated, yet we were to keep in touch through those who were so greatly befriending us and giving us every opportunity to prove their work. Chapter 12. The next day, all details were arranged, and 3 of our party, including myself, were to accompany Emil and Jest. The morning following found each party, with its guide and attendants, all ready to depart in different directions, with the understanding that we should carefully observe and record all that occurred, and should meet 60 days later at Emil's home in the village just spoken of, 200 miles distant. We were to keep in communication with each other through our friends. This was accomplished each evening by these friends, conversing with each other or traveling back and forth from party to party. If we wished to communicate with our chief, or with any other members of our party, all we needed to do was to give our message to our friends, and in an incredibly short time we would have the answer. In giving those messages, each would write down in full and note the time to the minute on each message. Then, when the answer came, we would do the same. When we came together again, we compared notes and found that all notes corresponded. Aside from this, our friends would travel from one camp to another and converse with us. We kept accurate records of these appearances and disappearances. Also, we noted the time, the place, and the conversations, and all checked fully when we compared notes later. At times after this we were widely separated. One party would be in Persia, one in China, one in Tibet, one in Mongolia, and one in India, always accompanied by our friends. At times they travel in the invisible, as we called it. Distances are as great as 1,000 miles and kept us informed as to the happenings and progress in each camp. The destination of the party to which I was assigned proved to be a small village to the southwest, located on the elevated plateau well up in the foothills of the Himalayas, and about 80 miles from our starting point. We did not take any provisions for the trip, but we were amply provided for at all times and had very comfortable quarters. We arrived at our destination early in the afternoon of the 5th day, were greeted by a delegation of villagers, and shown to comfortable quarters. We noted that the villagers treated Emil and Jess with the utmost reverence. We were told that Emil had never visited the village, but that Jess had been there before. The location of his first visit was in response to a call for help to rescue 3 villagers from the fierce snowmen that inhabit some of the wildest parts of the Himalayas. This present visit was in response to a similar call, and also to minister the sick who could not leave the village. These so-called snowmen are outcasts and renegades who have lived in the snow and ice regions of the mountains until they have developed a tribe that is able to live in the mountains' fastnesses without contact with any form of civilization. Though not numerous, they are very fierce and warlike, and at times capture and torture those who are unfortunate enough to fall into their hands. It proves that 4 of the villagers have been captured by these wild snowmen, the villagers, being at their wits' end to know what to do, had sent out a messenger to get in touch with Jas, and he had come to the rescue, bringing Emil and us along. Of course, we were all excited, thinking we were to get sight of these wild people, whom we had heard but supposed did not exist. We are at first believed that a rescue party would be organized and we would be allowed to join. But these hopes were shattered when Emil announced that he and Jess would go alone and that they would go immediately. In a few moments they disappeared and did not return until the second evening, with the four captives who told weird tales of their adventure and of the strange people that had captured them. It seems that these strange snow people go entirely naked, that their bodies have become covered with hair like that of a wild animal, and that they can withstand the intense cold of the mountain altitudes. They were said to move over the ground very swiftly. The fact that it is claimed that they were able to pursue and capture the wild animals that live in that region that they inhabit. These wild people call the masters the men from the sun, and when the masters go among them for the prisoner, they do not resist. We were also told that the masters had made a number of attempts to reach these wild people, but these attempts had come to naught because of the fear in which the people held them. It is said that if the masters do go among them, the snow men will not eat or sleep, but stay in the open night and day, so great is their fear. These people have lost all contact with civilization, even forgetting that they had ever contacted other races or that they are descendants from them. So far have they separated themselves from others. We were able to get Emil and Jess to say but little about the strange wild tribe, nor would we influence them to take us to them. When we questioned, the only comment was, "They are God's children, the same as we are, only they have lived so long in hatred and fear of their fellow men, and they have so developed the hatred and fear faculty that they have isolated themselves from their fellow men to such an extent that they have completely forgotten they are descendants of the human family, and think themselves the wild creatures they appear to be. They have gone in this way until they have even lost the instinct of the wild creatures. For the wild creatures knows by instinct when a human being loves it, and it will respond to that love. All we can say is that man brings forth that which he gazes upon, and separates himself from God and man, and in this way he can go lower than the animal. It would serve no purpose to take you among them. It would instead harm those people. We are in hopes some day to find some one among them who will be receptive to our teaching, and in this way reach them all. We were told that if we wished to make the attempt to see these strange people on our own initiative, we were at liberty to do so, that the masters could no doubt protect us from any harm, and if we should be taken prisoners, they could, in all probability, secure our release. We found that evening we were scheduled to leave the next day for a very ancient temple about 30 miles from the village where we were then stopping. My two companions decided they would forego seeing the temple and try to get a closer view of the wild man. They attempted to influence two of the villagers to go with them, but in this they met flat refusal, for none of the villagers would leave the village so long as they thought the wild man were around. My friend decided to attempt it alone, so, after receiving instructions from Emil and Jess as to the trail and general directions, they strapped on their sidearms and made ready to start. Before they left, Emil and Jess had exacted a promise from them that they would not shoot to kill, only as a last resort. They may shoot to frighten as much as they pleased, but they must give their word that if they killed it would be the last extremity. I was surprised that we had even a 45 Colt with us, as we had not carried firearms about us. I had discarded mine long ago and did not know where they were. It is so happened that one of the coolies that helped to look after our wants had put two pistols in the luggage and they had not been removed. Chapter 13. Emil, Jess, and I started out later in the day to go to the temple and arrived there the next day at 5:30 in the evening. We found two elderly men in charge, and I was made comfortable for the night. The temple is located on the high mountain peak, is built of rough stone, and it is laid to be over 12,000 years old. It is in a perfect state of preservation and repair. It is one of the first temples erected by the Siddha teachers and was erected by them as a place where they would go and have perfect silence. The site could not have been better chosen. It is on the highest peak in the part of the mountains. The elevation above sea level is 10,900 feet, and it is over 5,000 feet above the valley floor. The last 7 miles, it seemed to me, the trail was straight up. At times it led over poles that were supported by ropes fastened to boulders above, then thrown over the cliffside, and these supported the poles that served as a trail. As we walked over these poles, I realized that we were at least 600 feet in midair. At other times, we were obliged to climb pole ladders supported by ropes from above. The last ascent was perpendicular for about 300 feet and was accomplished wholly by pole ladders. When we arrived, I felt as if I were on top of the world. We were up before the sun the next morning, and I stepped out on the roof of that temple. I forgot all about the assets of the night before. The temple was so situated at the edge of the bluff that when you looked out, you could see nothing for 3,000 feet below, and it seemed as if the whole temple was suspended in midair. I had considerable difficulty in persuading myself to believe otherwise. In the distance we would see three mountains upon which, I was told, the temples similar to this were located, but they were so distant I could not make out the temples with my field glasses. Emil said that one of the other parties should have reached the temple on the farthest mountain at about the same time that we arrived here last evening, and that our chief was in the party. He said that if I wished to communicate with him, I might do so, as they were at the time standing on the roof of the temple a good deal like we were doing. I took my notebook and wrote that I was standing on the roof of the temple 10,900 feet above sea level, and it seemed to me as if the temple were suspended in midair. At the time was exactly 4:55 a.m. by my watch, and the day was Saturday, August 2nd. Emil read this message and stood silently a moment. Then the answer came. Time 5:01 a.m. by my watch. Place suspended in midair 8,400 feet above sea level. Date Saturday, August 2nd. View wonderful, but situation most remarkable. Then Emil said, "If you wish, I will take this note and bring the answer when I return. I would like to go and converse with those at the temple, if you do not mind." I gave him the note willingly, and he disappeared. In 1 hour and 45 minutes he returned with a note from the chief stating that Emil had arrived there at 5:16 a.m. and that they were having a wonderful time speculating what would come next. We stayed at this temple 3 days. During the time Emil visited the other parties, carried notes from me, and returned with answers from them. The morning of the fourth day we prepared to return to the village where we had left my associates. I found that Emil and Jess wished to go to another small village located in the valley about 30 miles from where our trail left the valley trail. I suggested that they go and I accompany them. We camped that night at a sleep herder's lodge and were up and started early next morning in order to reach our destination before dark the next day as we were walking. We were not able to use horses on the trip to the temple, and so had left them at the village. About 10 o'clock that morning there came on a heavy electric storm, and it looked as if there would be a downpour, but no rain fell. The country through which we were passing was quite heavily wooded, and the ground was covered with heavy, thick, dry grass. The country seemed exceptionally dry. The lightning ignited the grass in a number of places, and before we knew it, we were virtually surrounded by a forest fire. In a few moments this fire was raging like mad, and closing in upon us from three sides with the swiftness of an express train. The smoke was settling down in thick clouds, and I became bewildered and panic-stricken. Emil and Jess seemed cool and collected, and this reassured me somewhat. They said there are two ways of escape. One is to try to get to the next creek where there is water flowing through the deep canyon. If we can reach this canyon, which is about 5 miles away, we can in all probability make ourselves safe until the fire has burned itself out. The other way is to go through the fire with us if you can trust us to take you through. Instantly all fear left me as I realized that these men had proved true in all emergencies. Throwing myself, as it were, wholly upon their protection, I stepped between them and we proceeded on our way, which seemed to be in the direction the fire was raging the most. Then immediately it seemed as if a great archway opened before us, and we went on directly through the fire, without the least inconvenience, either from smoke or heat, or from burning brands strewn along the trail under our feet. There were at least 6 miles of this fire-swept area that we passed through. It seemed to me as if we were as calmly walking along that trail as though there were no fire raging around. This went on until we crossed a small stream, and then we were out of the fire. While we were going through the fire, Emil said to me, "Can you not see how easy it is to use God's higher law to replace the lower one when you really need the higher? We have now raised the vibrations of our bodies to a higher vibration than that of the fire, and the fire does not harm us. If senses mortal could see us now, they would think we have disappeared, when in reality our identity is as it has always been. In reality, we actually see no difference. It is the concept of the mortal senses that loses the contact with us. Could they see us as we are? No doubt they would think we had ascended. In reality, that is what happens. We do ascend to a plane of consciousness where the mortal does lose contact with us. All can do the same as we are doing. We are using the law given us by the Father to use. We are able to use this law to convey our bodies through any space. This is the law we are using when you see us appear and disappear, or, as you call it, annihilate space. To simply overcome difficulties by raising our consciousness above them. And in this way, we are able to overcome or to come up over all limitations that man is in mortal consciousness has placed upon himself. To me, it had seemed as if we were going over the ground with our feet just touching it. When we were safe across the stream out of the fire, my first impression was that I had awakened from a deep sleep and had dreamed it, but gradually awoke to the realization of it all, and the real meaning of it began to dawn upon my consciousness. We found a shady place on the bank of the stream, ate our lunch, and rested for an hour, and went on to the village. End of chapter 13.